For those that don't already know, an iceberg video is a video where you take an iceberg tier's image and explain each caption on it. An iceberg tier image is an edited image that takes a certain subject and tiers information about that subject from least to most obscure. So for a normal Naruto iceberg, the top tier would be something like Kakashi got the sharingan from Obito, while something on the lowest tier would be something like Itachi can use water style. But I'm not interested in just listing off a bunch of facts about the series because there's not much to be done with that information. I also haven't found any Naruto icebergs in that style that I like. I'm more interested in the mysteries of the series when it comes to an iceberg video, so that's why I've made my own Naruto iceberg of fan theories about the instances in Naruto that we don't know fully about. Typically iceberg videos with the theories about the mysteries as the captions, so I did the same here to keep the same spirit. I'll still be starting each caption by explaining the mystery before I explain the fan theory though. The way I've tiered my iceberg is by how often the mystery is discussed. The first tier is what I consider to be a commonly talked about mystery, and the fourth tier is what I consider to be very rarely discussed. The fifth tier is reserved for odd occurrences that either I've seen no one other than me bring up, or I have only seen discussed a handful of times. So as I go from theory to theory, my confidence in them will probably vary wildly, as it's not tiered by confidence, but instead by obscurity. That's about all the context I think I need to give for the video, so I'll go ahead and start with the first tier of theories. Hashirama died from natural causes. As you can tell, this theory tries to explain something we know almost nothing concrete about. I'm of course referring to how did Hashirama die. The little we know about the end of Hashirama's life is that he died sometime right before or during the First Great Shinobi War. This was a significant amount of time after he defeated Madara too, as he did distribute the tailed beast to the other great nations, presumably after he took the Nine Tails away from Madara. After that Kage summit, we know nothing about the rest of his life, other than that Tobirama became Hokage and still ended up dying in the First Great Shinobi War. With Madara out of the picture by that Kage summit, Hashirama can easily be argued to be stronger than the entire world at this point. When Madara was reanimated, he constantly reiterated that only Hashirama could stop him, and he went on to destroy an entire army with little difficulty, and then made the 5 Kage look like children. In Hashirama's case, he defeated the Nine Tails with a perfect Susanoo protecting it. For reference, Naruto's half of the Nine Tails, keyword half, overpowered the 2 through 7 tailed beasts. Hashirama also showed that while heavily weakened by being an Edo Tensei, he permanently restrained the Ten Tails. The Ten Tails never broke out of his gracious deity gates and only escaped them because Obito became its host. For comparison, the Shinobi Alliance were getting decimated by the Ten Tails and were about to be completely blown up by it before Minato teleported its Jubi bomb away. I could go further, but I think I've demonstrated that it doesn't seem conceivable that any group of people on Earth soon after Madara went into hiding could have defeated Hashirama. The most common, and I think most plausible explanation for his death is that his constant regeneration shortened his lifespan. When Tsunade first showed in the Sannin Showdown that she could regenerate entire organs, Shizune warns that doing that will shorten Tsunade's lifespan. Madara said that Tsunade's ability to regenerate was just like Hashirama's, so it would make sense that he was at the same risk as Tsunade. It's even worse for him though, because he grew up during the Warring States period, where he was quite literally always at war. When he was younger and weaker, he could have taken countless fatal blows on the chin at the time. Even when he became the head of his clan and he still had to fight his rival in Madara. We don't know how dramatically this will shorten your lifespan in Naruto, but Shizune was very concerned by Tsunade doing this just once. It has been theorized that our cells can only divide so many times before they accumulate so many harmful mutations that your body just no longer is able to function properly. In Hashirama's case, this is very likely what causes premature death. Jashin is an Odzutsuki. Jashin is the god that Hidan worships, and in return he becomes immortal. This is another thing that we know next to nothing about for sure. All we really know is that Jashin is some kind of god whose religion centers around killing other people. He also can turn himself into a voodoo doll if he ingests another person's blood, and then stands in a religious symbol. There's been some filler exploring this more, but in terms of the manga, that's literally all we know. Many have speculated that since Jashin is said to be a god, he must be an Odzutsuki, and that's because the only godlike characters that we know come from that clan. Even the Sage of the Sixth Pass, who was only half Odzutsuki, apparently crafted the world with the sword of Nunoboko, for example. There are also some other godlike abilities we see from the Otsutsuki and Boruto, but I won't list them because they're potential spoilers, but you really just need to know that Otsutsuki basically equals God in Boruto. The problem with this though is that Hidan was introduced far before there was any mention of Otsutsuki at all, so it's unlikely that Kishimoto would have planned that out that far ahead. Personally, I don't think Boruto will ever give any evidence for this theory, as I don't think the writers are worried about Hidan at all going forward. I more so believe in Joshin just being just another god in Naruto that gives you power. For example, the Reaper Death Seal is only possible by using the God of Death, and in return you have to sacrifice your own life. That's similar to how immortality is only possible by using Joshin, and in return you have to give sacrifices, potentially. Naruto is heavily influenced by the Japanese religion Shintoism, which is polytheistic. While I do know very little about Shintoism, I have read that there is said to be an infinite or near infinite amount of kami or gods. So that could explain why only Hidan seems to know about Joshin. Joshin could also just be so obscure that not even someone like Orochimaru knows about it, while the kami used for the Reaper Death Seal is well known because the Uzumaki clan made him popular, for example. Personally, I think it makes more sense that Joshin is some obscure deity rather than an Otsutsuki. All full-blooded Otsutsuki seem to only want humans for their chakra anyway, so it wouldn't really make sense that he would grant one immortality for worshipping it. This mystery is probably one we'll never get closure on due to Hidan not being that significant or popular of a character. Ramen Guy was Minato's teammate. This is an old theory that's pretty simple. We see in a flashback scene one image of Team Jiraiya, and the other boy in the group looks suspiciously like the Ramen Guy. Now I wouldn't say it's a perfect match because the kid has a lot darker skin, and the facial structure is noticeably different. However, that could be explained by him just being really young. For example, if we compare Jiraiya's Genin face with his Part 1 or Part 2 face, the Genin face is much rounder and less developed. What really sells me on this theory though are the same type of eyes. Both are permanently squinting, and I don't recall any other canon characters having the same eye design. Choza often has his eyes squinted as well, but we've seen him with open eyes a few times, and he has red hair anyway. These two being the same people also would explain why Ramen Guy was the only non-ninja adult to not shun Naruto. It's been often portrayed that all the civilians hated Naruto for being a host, with the exception of Ramen Guy. So that's another nice little tie-in that would explain why Ramen Guy was always friendly with Naruto since he was Minato's teammate. That's really all there is to that theory. I think it's pretty plausible personally, mainly because of the eyes. And I might as well bring up the joke theory that Ramen Guy never opens his eyes because he has the Rinnegan or he stole a sharingan like Kakashi. I guess since he's never opened his eyes, I'll say this is neither debunked or confirmed. Last thing I want to bring up about Team Jiraiya is that the girl is theorized to be Makoto, which is Sasuke's mom. There's not much to go off of this except the girl has black hair and the ages match up as well. We do see Kushina chat with Makoto in a friendly manner right before giving birth, so that supports the idea that Minato, Kushina, and Makoto were all in the same class. I actually think this is pretty likely too, due to one thing no one else has seemed to bring up. On the page where we see Team Jiraiya, we also see Orochimaru with the student Anko, but we don't see her other teammates. If Minato's teammates were just nobody, why would they just be drawn when Anko's teammates were not? It's too intentional for me to ignore, and the two most likely matches based on age and appearance are Ramen Guy and Makoto. Itachi had AIDS. This one's referring to the multitude of explanations for Itachi's illness. I'll get to why I chose AIDS here after I explain the background. So what we know about Itachi's death on the surface is that he had been ill for a while and prolonged his life just to fight Sasuke. The main symptom we see from him is coughing up blood and I suppose just generally being lethargic. Some people have suggested that he had tuberculosis, but a real popular one is that he had an autoimmune disease called microscopic polyangiitis. Symptoms for this include coughing up blood and bleeding from your eyes. I debunked this though, as Itachi doesn't show most of its symptoms and this is a really rare disorder. He isn't bleeding from his eyes until he uses the Mangekyo, which is normal, and then he also doesn't have red spots all over his skin, which is expected when you have this disease. So I see that explanation just being false and way too specific of a disease for Kishimoto to choose. Now the joke explanation for this though is that Itachi had ninja AIDS, but on a serious note I actually made my own theory that Itachi actually did have AIDS. I had to dive very deep for my evidence for that video, so if you want a quality explanation, I'll leave a link to that in the description. For an unabridged Iceberg video explanation, I'll say this. AIDS is an autoimmune disease that weakens your immune system to the point that you are highly susceptible to catching anything. Oftentimes, AIDS patients die from something they catch rather than AIDS itself. At the beginning of the arc where he fights Sasuke, we see him standing in the rain. Kisame tells him to get out of the rain or he'll get sick, and he does, and he appears healthy here. Flash forward a few days, and Itachi's got word Sasuke is hunting him. They're in the rain again, and Itachi willingly walks out of shelter into the rain, while Kisame once again says he'll catch something. And then the next time we see him after this, he's violently ill while he's fighting Sasuke. My theory is that he had AIDS and purposely got sick so he could sell the fight against Sasuke. Obito said Itachi used all kinds of medicines to keep himself alive, which could mean he was catching many different illnesses he needed to treat. Once he knows he can't run from Sasuke, he stops taking his medicine and purposely weakens his immune system by standing in cold rain. He then catches something like pneumonia probably, which causes you to cough blood and can even cause major cardiac issues. Another fact about AIDS that supports this theory is that cardiovascular diseases are very common in AIDS patients and very common ways for them to die. I am also very sold on this theory mainly due to the rain scenes showing Itachi's attitudes towards catching something changes once he knows that Sasuke is hunting him. It explains why Itachi's health flip-flops that fast. If you're intrigued by this, I really would suggest watching that video because that is an extremely short explanation to this theory. The infinite Tsukiyomi never ended. This one is more of a meme theory, but I do see some people talk about it in a serious manner. It would be a crazy twist. Of course, this refers to the idea that the ending of Naruto and all of Boruto is just Naruto's infinite Tsukiyomi dream. It's captivated so many people that even the English voice actor for Madara has put some fuel into this fire.
So this was your dream, Naruto Uzumaki.
What we see in this story is Sasuke's Rinnegan is somehow able to block infinite Tsukiyomi for the rest of Team 7 by shielding them with his Susanoo. This theory instead proposes that all of Team 7, except maybe Sasuke, fell under the Genjutsu, and that's why Naruto kind of has a fairy tale ending and fairy tale beginning to Boruto. Most people don't take this seriously, but I'll explain why it doesn't make sense. Madara said the dream world was where anything you wanted would happen, but that wasn't quite the case for Naruto. He didn't want Obito to die, for example, nor did he want to have to fight Sasuke. It totally contradicts what Madara wanted the infinite dream to be. It's a cool concept, but not plausible at all. Hashirama was killed. This one also addresses the mystery surrounding Hashirama's death. I already explained the background for that, but this theory brings up a very subtle but very interesting observation. When Hashirama is reanimated, a piece of his arm armor is missing off of his left arm. This could imply that he was defeated in battle since his armor is damaged when he's brought back into the physical world. The last time we see Hashirama in armor while alive is when he fought Madara. He starts the fight looking like normal, but the left arm piece of his arm is fully gone by the end of that battle. That's the same arm with the damaged arm from when he's reanimated. This is even the case for both times he was reanimated, so that shows that Kishimoto had the opportunity to retcon this for the work, but didn't. Now Hashirama's power levels were retconned based on how much weaker he was in part 1, and then we start seeing the narrative switch to him being a god of shinobi in early part 2. So it's possible Kishimoto originally had a Hashirama dying in battle, retconned his power, which means that he couldn't be killed in battle, and then didn't want to retcon the missing armor piece to keep the design consistent. There's also some other flaws with this theory that make me heavily doubt it. Hiruzen and Minato had both their tops torn off in their final battle, but neither of them have that when they're reanimated. None of the other reanimated clothes reflected their death either, and like I said at the beginning of the video, there's no way Hashirama could be killed by any group of humans based off of what Madara did in the war arc, and how he could do things like restrain the Ten Tails. So I'm not going to totally discount the idea of it, but personally I think it was a retcon, and Kishimoto just wanted to keep that Edo design consistent. There's too many flaws in this theory for me to embrace it, and he might have just not been able to fully salvage his left arm armor after the final battle, and as a result he was short a piece. That's a long shot for an explanation, but it is true that the last time we see that left arm armor being used by a live Hashirama, it gets completely blown off. I'm personally choosing the regeneration theory over this one. Akatsuki rings are for sealing Biju. This can be an overlooked detail if someone doesn't bring it to your attention, but there are some moments that indicate that these rings were used for more than just cosmetic purposes. We first see their significance when Orochimaru shows that he still has his Akatsuki ring lying around in part 1. Then in the Kazekage rescue arc, we see that Deidara goes back to look for his arm, and he also notes that he needs to find his ring as well. Zetsu and Obito do a similar thing when they go back to where Sasori died solely to retrieve his ring. After that, no other Akatsuki rings are recovered because there was no opportunity to recover them. The Akatsuki presumably don't know where Hidan was buried, Kakuzu's body was taken by the leaf, and Deidara's ring likely did not survive his self-detonation, so on and so forth. We only ever see 10 rings in total, and the fact that Deidara and Obito would go through such great lengths to get those rings suggests they're not replicable and very important. Some have theorized that they're used in the Akatsuki Zoom meetings, but there's no evidence supporting that really. The only time we see the rings do anything is when the Akatsuki seals the One Tails. We see each member stand on the same finger of the Geto statue as the finger they wore their ring on. So we see Sasori standing on the left thumb because he wears his ring on the left thumb. Even further than that, we see Orochimaru wore his on his left pinky, and we never see anyone stand on that left pinky of the Geto statue when they sealed Bijou. We also see the symbols of the Akatsuki rings light up when they start sealing the One Tails, and this is the only time we see the rings actually do anything. So based off of all of this, it seems like the rings are somehow connected to the Geto statue, and they can't be replicated. That explains why Deidara went back to get his ring and why the symbols light up during the sealing ritual. I have no idea why the rings would be connected to the Geto statue, considering that it's just the husk of the Ten Tails. The only explanation for their creation would be that either Nagato made them somehow, or they just somehow naturally come with the Geto statue. We'll probably never know how they were made, but this theory makes perfect sense otherwise, since the only time we see the rings do anything is when Bijou are sealed. Lee exempted his final exam. This one refers to the final exam for the academy that you need to pass. For Naruto's class, we saw you needed to do the clone technique, not to be confused with shadow clones. Clone technique is basically just making another image of yourself, but they can't do anything. So if a ninjutsu was needed to pass the academy, how on earth did Lee pass? This theory proposes that he simply just didn't do it and instead just got passed as an exception. Remember, Naruto originally failed, but Iruka ended up passing him after he summoned shadow clones. You can argue Naruto passed because he did a way more advanced jutsu though. In Lee's case, you would think he would have had flunked out before even getting to that exam anyway. We saw in Sasuke's report card before the massacre that he was already being graded on ninjutsu years before graduating. However, there is some evidence that Lee could tread water and eventually exempt his final exam, assuming it was the same as Naruto's class. Firstly, we see on Kabuto's ninja info card that Lee has some aptitude in both ninjutsu and genjutsu. For genjutsu, it's possible that he knows how to resist genjutsu by disturbing his chakra. In ninjutsu, I have no idea how he would have any aptitude for it other than just knowing about it. Ultimately, this shows that he had some type of aptitude for jutsu, and that could explain why he didn't just flunk out early. As for how he passed, I think Guy pulled some strings to allow Lee to. We saw Guy watching Lee during the academy, and he seems pretty infatuated with him. He also ended up on Guy's team, which didn't seem like a coincidence at all. It's very possible that Guy asked for Lee to be passed, and maybe Iruka agreed since Lee had so much potential in taijutsu. I think this theory is very likely because there is quite literally no way that Lee could have passed a final exam pertaining to jutsu. It also seems pretty intentional that Guy already wanted to train him years before he graduated, so it seems likely that he pulled some strings for him. Obito's Hashirama cells healed his eyes. A lot of people like to bring up how Obito never went blind as a result of using his Mangekyo. It's a very valid question considering that we see Obito liberally use it while Sasuke went near blind after using it in only 3 fights. The only real possible explanation for this is that Obito's Hashirama cells would just heal the damage he did to his eye. It gets a little bit forgotten, but the side of Obito that got crushed under that rock was completely replaced with Hashirama cells by Madara. Obito is the only Uchiha we've seen not go blind from Mangekyo overuse, and he's the only one to have Hashirama cells, excluding Madara after his final fight with Hashirama. We also see Itachi note that in Shisui's case, that his Koto Matsukami would take 10 years to reactivate, unless you had the power of Hashirama cells. And during the Kage Summit, we see Danzo was planning on using Koto Matsukami a second time on Obito after using it on Mifune in the same day. So that's direct proof that Hashirama cells makes it easier to use the Mangekyo. There's not much to this theory other than that, but it seems like the only good explanation for Obito not going blind in that eye. Hashirama is a slug sage. This is kind of a newer theory that was overlooked for a very long time. The background to it is that Hashirama is the only sage we see not have a summoning to go along with it. We also never see Hashirama summon a single animal. The reason why people guess he's using a slug sage mode is that his granddaughter Tsunade's only summon is a slug named Katsuyu. You might think this is a stretch since Hashirama died early in Tsunade's life, likely long before she learned how to summon Katsuyu, but as we see with all the Toad sages, you seem to often need to know a guy to get the chance to learn it. Minato and Naruto became sages through Jiraiya, Kabuto became a sage through Orochimaru, but Orochimaru seemed to be able to find Ryuchi Cave by himself. So you can see how it's very possible that Tsunade got Katsuyu thanks to either Hashirama or the Senju clan in general. What really solidifies this theory is two very subtle statements by Kabuto and Orochimaru. When Kabuto says he went to Ryuchi Cave to learn Sage Mode, he says that it was just as legendary as Mount Miyaboku and the Shikotsu Woods. So that confirms those are the three places where you can become a sage at. Later on in the war, we see Orochimaru say that Katsuyu came from the Shikotsu Woods, and that confirms that slug sages are an actual thing and not just speculation. So based off of the fact that the only summoning we see a Senju do is a slug, and we know that the slugs can teach you Sage Mode, the only possible sage animal Hashirama could have learned Sage Mode from was slugs. His sage design doesn't look like a toad or a snake sage either, so on the surface level this seems like a good estimation, but if you dig deeper it seems like the only possible explanation. Akatsuki members represent reasons for war. This is a self-explanatory fan theory that originated on Reddit, from what I can tell. There's no direct basis for it in the manga, so this theory is solely built on speculation. Before I talk about what each member represents, I'll say that it's a very cool idea, but I think it's too flawed to be a theory I'd fully accept. It works for some of the members, but not all of them. Also, some of the Akatsuki motivations are just common motivations that don't always result in war either. So because of that, and because this theory doesn't work for every member, I don't fully believe in it. But as for the motivations, starting with Hidan, his is religion. The Crusades come to mind when thinking about holy wars. Kakuzu's motivation is money, and the Opium Wars and the American Revolutionary War come to mind, although those were technically about trade. Pain and Conan's motivations is peace, which may seem contradictory, but that was their ultimate goal. The famous phrase, "if you want peace, prepare for war," originates from Rome after all, and one of Rome's motivations for war was to stop future invasions. I won't get too philosophical about if this ideal makes sense, but it is common for nations to try to conquer and then instill peace. Obito is somewhat about peace, but also ideological. He wanted everyone to live in a certain way, whereas Nagato just wanted everyone to chill out after a nuclear apocalypse from the Ten Tails. Many civil wars are like this, such as the French Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution, which were both about ending monarchies. After those members, though, it starts to become a reach. Itachi is to protect your own nation, but Itachi was a pacifist who killed his clan to avoid war. And you don't incite war to protect your nations. That's a far more reactive reason than any of the other members who are supposed to have proactive reasons. Kisame's is to expose lies, but I think that can only work for a coup, and even that's a bit extreme. Kisame was a believer in the infinite Tsukuyomi, which is why he actually willingly chose to be in the Akatsuki in the first place, so it would work better if you just called him an ideologist like Obito. Zetsu is supposed to protect land and nature, but I don't think Zetsu cares about nature at all. Deidara is supposed to be a terrorist because of his explosions, but his motivations for that is 100% intrinsic. Sasori's is supposed to be wanting to have a puppet government, but that doesn't make any sense either. Orochimaru also doesn't make any sense either because his motivations were also 100% intrinsic. So that's 3 Akatsuki members that don't fit the theory, and another 2 are who are reaches. It's a cool theory, but I don't think Kishimoto had this in mind when he thought of the Akatsuki. Hidan died from malnutrition. This one addresses the fate of Hidan after Shikamaru buries his decapitated body. We see in the Warwick that Hidan is the only Akatsuki member to not be revived, and Kakuzu takes this as evidence that Hidan is still alive. According to a quote from Kishimoto, while he was still writing Part 2, he said that Hidan was still alive but dying from a lack of nutrition. So that confirms most of the theory, and we can estimate that he's dead by Boruto if he was already starting to die 15 years prior. As for why his immortality stopped working, many people speculate that he needs to do his rituals to stay immortal, and he couldn't do that anymore after he got buried. It's a good explanation, but we know so little about Joshin that there's no evidence confirming or debunking this idea. The malnutrition theory is solid though, considering that Kishimoto himself confirmed it. Itachi buried Shisui. It's often mentioned that Shisui's body was never found. The Uchiha police force searched for him, but found nothing. Kabuto found every corpse he wanted to for Edo Tensei except for Jiraiya's, who was too deep at sea, and Shisui, who he said he could not find anywhere. This makes sense because no one even knows where Itachi saw Shisui die, nor would anyone know where they went. So I see only two scenarios for what happened to Shisui's corpse. He either was eaten by scavenger animals or he was buried by Itachi since he was the only one who knew where he died. I personally believe he would have buried him in an unmarked grave as a sign of respect and to ensure that no one would find him. This was also the moment where Itachi gained his Mangekyo Sharingan, so he may even have used Amaterasu to completely ensure that there was no evidence of his death. Either way, I think the answer to why Shisui was never found is quite simply that no one but Itachi would have known. There's no direct evidence for Itachi burying him though, so that's just my headcanon because I think it would be in character for him to do that. Kimimaro had cancer. Kimimaro's mystery illness is not brought up as much as Itachi's, but you still see it discussed on rare occasion. His illness is a lot more impactful than most people realize, as Kabuto and Orochimaru said after Konoha crushed that had Kimimaro been there, Hiruzen would have been smoothly assassinated. And if Orochimaru didn't have his arms sealed, he would have taken Sasuke's body at the end of part 1, instead of having to take some random prisoners right before Sasuke arrived, due to the Reaper Death seal almost killing him. But as for the illness, we know it had to be somewhat sudden, since Kimimaro was part of the Konoha Crush plan. By the Sasuke retrieval arc, we see he is bedridden, but as for one last favor to Orochimaru, he has a short recovery. He shows no symptoms whatsoever though. We only see him say that his body was moving through will alone when he sees Tayuya, and then he dies suddenly while fighting Gaara. So that barely limits our possible options at all based on that information. There is one subtle moment by Kabuto that indicates that Kimimaro had cancer though. When talking about the illness with Orochimaru, Kabuto mentioned that there was too little information on Kimimaru's body, and had he known Kimimaru's clan's medical history, things would have been a lot different. So this could indicate that he had some type of rare genetic disorder, but what was special about this clan was their bone jutsu. If this was some illness that was special to the Kaguya clan, it must have had to do something with their bones, since that was what distinguished them from other clans. I've researched this, and the only common deadly bone-based illness is bone cancer. And this would make sense that Kimimaro would have this if he was always creating new bones in battle. If cancer is a harmful mutation that causes your cells to divide uncontrollably, then constantly creating new bone cells would dramatically increase your chances for getting bone cancer. On the other hand, constantly creating new bones could generally shorten your lifespan the same way that Tsunade's regeneration does. Personally, I prefer the bone cancer theory though, because Kabuto said his illness was specific to the clan that is known for their bones. I think that's the best theory, but the regeneration one is also not that bad. The Senju clan bred out. This of course refers to the fact that by the events of part 1 and part 2, the only living Senju that is even named is Tsunade, which is odd considering that the Senju and the Uchiha were the founding clans of the Leaf Village. The Uchiha even seemingly outlasted the Senju despite losing a war to the Senju right before they made peace. So you would think that the Senju would have a sizable numbers advantage on the Uchiha at that point. Yet by the end of the Third Great Shinobi War, we see the Uchiha are thriving while the Senju are nearing extinction. I don't think this is a case of their existence just not being important enough to mention either. The Sarutobi clan for 90% of the series only consisted of Hiruzen, Asuma, and Konohamaru, but in the Fourth Great Shinobi War we see many Sarutobi clan members use fire style in unison against the Ten Tails. We saw many other clans of the Leaf also fight in unison during the war, but we never saw the Senju do that. And that's about all we know about the Senju when it comes to their state by the end of the series. I don't support any theories that say they were wiped out their wars, as the Uchiha weren't, and that was the only clan that could rival them. So if they weren't killed, the only logical conclusion would simply be that they brought out, and there's some evidence to base this on. We know that the Uchiha was a pretty homogeneous clan that likely married within the clan often. They're a little bit more diverse than some would give them credit based on how the background characters look. But if you look at every named Uchiha, they have dark hair, dark eyes, and dark skin. Based off of Sasuke's mom's appearance, she certainly seems like she was born an Uchiha instead of becoming an Uchiha through marriage like Sakura. So they must have kept their bloodline pure through marrying within the clan often. The Senju were the exact opposite. They have no distinct shared features in their appearance, and that goes for both named and background characters. This was the case before the Leaf Village was created too. We do know that Hashirama married into the Uzumaki clan for diplomatic reasons, and we also know that his granddaughter Tsunade had blonde hair, despite her grandparents having red and black hair. So Hashirama's child likely did not marry into the Uzumaki clan if that's the case. That's the only marriage we know about it when it comes to the Senju, so this is all we can base this theory on. If the head of the clan was marrying for diplomatic reasons, it's very likely that other prominent members like Tobirama would have too. Remember, this is all during the dawn of the Leaf Village where clans were still joining as it was growing. The Uchiha clan were far more clan-oriented than the Senju, so they likely did not do many arranged diplomatic marriages, if at all. They were ready to launch a coup against the village after all. Hashirama made it clear he was village-oriented, so when he married out of his clan it likely set a precedent for the Senju. There's not too much direct evidence that fuels this theory, but if you really read between the lines and do some rationalizations, it seems like the only plausible explanation for this unsolved mystery. Kakuzu killed the Gold and Silver brothers. Kinkaku and Genkaku are one of the least talked about characters considering how important they are to the story. They kind of have a wild but mysterious backstory, with Tobirama's death at their hands being their most talked about feat. The circumstances of their death are a complete mystery though. We know that there was an attempted coup during the peace summit with Tobirama, so they must have had some support in their cause if they weren't exiled or killed afterwards. Perhaps peace with the Leaf at the time was unpopular, but their supporters turned on them. The last thing we know they did was kill the second Hokage. They somehow were killed after this, but they weren't killed with their special ninja tools, as they still had them inside them when they were reanimated. You would think that a simple explanation would be that they died in war like many other characters did, but these two were too strong to go out that easily. Beyond their hacks, their version 2 chakra modes require an army of Jonin to take on. When Kinkaku went into version 2 while reanimated, he decimated the division at the beachfront so badly that an entire reinforcement needed to take him on. But then we see him lose to Team 10 while Genkaku lost to Darawi. So there's some conflicting feats going on there, because personally I don't think Darawi and Team 10 would be able to take down an army of thousands of shinobi like Kinkaku did. I chalk this up to them being written out quickly like many of the reanimations on the first day of the war. I mean, Data and Sasori lost to Kankuro and Sai of all people. Hanzo lost to a damn samurai. It just makes no sense, so I just highball the Gold and Silver brothers because it keeps the lore more consistent. So if one of these brothers could take out an army of thousands, how on earth did they die then? No Cloud Shinobi killed them, as their headbands were not crossed out, and the Cloud Ninja that fought them in the war referred to them as just a dark spot in Cloud's history. I'll get more into other possible explanations for death scenarios for them later, because there's another theory about this at the bottom of the tier list. As for Kakuzu, he most likely saw these two die. When Kinkaku entered version 2 because Genkaku was sealed, Kakuzu remarks this only happens when Genkaku was done for. So that clearly implies that he saw Genkaku die, and maybe even Kinkaku too, but why would he even be in that situation? Based off of canon materials, we don't really know what Kakuzu was doing after going rogue and before the Akatsuki. Presumably he was a mercenary and or bounty hunter, since he said he was constantly finding new hearts, despite having no allegiance to any nation at the time. So this theory states that Kakuzu worked as a mercenary for some huge army that ended up killing the Gold and Silver brothers. I don't think Kakuzu personally did this. I just wrote that on the Iceberg because that was the only way I could shorten it to fit. He would have mentioned if he had killed him too, kind of similar to how he said he only fought the first Hokage, he didn't kill the first Hokage. More than likely this army would have been from the Leaf, as they did kill Tobirama. I'll get more into this idea later when I cover the other theories, so I'll leave it at that for now. I'm confident Kakuzu fought against the Gold and Silver brothers when they died, but as for who else was there, I'm not very confident in any potential answers. Kurama was tortured. Like the last one, this title is heavily abridged so it could fit the Iceberg. The full title for this theory would be more like Kurama hated humans because he was tortured for almost 100 years. The background for this is that we see that most of the other tailed beasts hate humans, but not to the extent that Kurama did. A lot of that can be chalked up to his personality, and he was likely the most sought after tailed beast. What no one ever seems to bring up is that while Kushina was his host, he was crucified against a ball of lava inside of her. We see that the other tailed beasts are usually just behind a gate, while inside their host, but not this time around. For some reason, the Uzumaki felt that was not enough, and literally crucified Kurama into a giant ball of lava. It would make sense for Mito would have had the same type of seal as Kushina, which means that Kurama spent about 100 years literally crucified against a ball of lava. So no wonder he was constantly pissed off for the first 17 years of Naruto's life. So while the other tailed beasts hated humans for imprisoning them, Kurama's hate transcended all of them because the Uzumaki felt the need to literally crucify him against a ball of lava. That's really all there is to this theory. So it's a small one, but I think it's a very valid one considering how pissed off you would be if someone literally crucified you against a giant ball of lava. Rock Lee has autism. This is my own personal theory that addresses the mystery as to why Rock Lee can't perform jutsu. Once again, if you want to see a less abridged version, I'll link my video about it in the description. It's always bothered me that very few people have questioned why Lee can't use jutsu. Most people will just say that he had no aptitude for it or he was just born without the ability. But if that's true, how on earth would he learn an S-rank technique like the 8 inner gates? We know he can manipulate his own chakra fine, as we have seen him stand on water during the Kazekage rescue arc. He can even open up to 5 gates by part 1, which prompted Kakashi to call him a genius. So why can't he transform chakra into jutsu? The difference between manipulating your own chakra and using your chakra to make a jutsu is imagining. We saw in Naruto's training for the Rasengan that after he learned how to properly manipulate his chakra to his hand, the next step was envisioning his chakra violently rotating. This isn't subtle either. The manga makes it clear you have to envision the Rasengan in your hand, and Naruto doesn't achieve this until he intensely focuses and imagines the Rasengan. So if the step before learning the Rasengan is walking on water, the next step of envisioning the jutsu is the one Lee can't do. He can open gates fine because that's never been shown to be a jutsu. It was explained as manipulating your chakra in a certain way that would nullify the chakra inhibitors inside your body. Lee must have trouble imagining jutsus. A disorder called aphantasia is when you have trouble imagining things or even imagining anything. This disorder is highly common in people with autism. The autism theory has more to do with his extreme personality. I won't go over every symptom, but a main symptom would be having restricted and repetitive interest. Lee's entire character revolves around him training to get better and Guy Sensei. That's not an exaggeration. He cares about his comrades, but other than that, that's quite literally all there is to this character. Autism also affects how you communicate socially, and I think someone can agree that Lee acts differently than everyone else. He's always dead serious and only talks in formal language. This is very common in those with autism as well. I don't have time to point out all my pieces of evidence for this theory, but the last thing I want to bring up is his eyes. Other than Kisame's shark eyes, Lee's the only character with perfect circles for eyes. He's also the only character who can't use jutsu. Seems like more than a coincidence to me. I know Death Note and Naruto have no relation, but I do find it very interesting that the two characters widely thought to be autistic and that anime also have circular eyes too. But overall, this is my own theory that no one else had come up with when I first uploaded it. I do a better job arguing for it in that video, but this is a headcanon that I fully embrace. Based off of the comments of that video, the theory was well received, and several people who said they were autistic said I was spot on with my theory. Uzumaki clan lived in the land of waves. This is a very obscure but very under-talked about theory that I've traced back to an internet article in 2015, I'll link it in the comments. Something odd about the land of waves is that it's never pointed out on a map despite us seeing a world map in that very arc. There's only one island next to the land of fire too, but this was confirmed by Kushina to be the land of whirlpools, which is where the Uzumaki clan lived. We know that the Uzumaki clan left the land of eddies and spread out through the world due to their nation being destroyed in the Second Great Shinobi War. After the Uzumaki leave, we have zero information on what happened to the island. So this theory proposes that the land of whirlpools became the land of waves. There's a lot of evidence supporting this actually. We know that the land of waves have no shinobis, and we know that the clan that ruled the land of whirlpools fled their country. Both of these nations were also close to the land of fire too. If you compare the land of whirlpools on a map and the land of waves in a close-up map, they are shaped very similar. They both have the same general shape and they're both sloped the same as well. The resemblance is uncanny honestly, but the land of waves is shown to be an archipelago while the land of whirlpools looks to be contiguous. It would be fair to chalk this out to being the land of whirlpools just being simplified on the world map, as it would look weird if you drew like 10 small islands in a world map. It wouldn't show up very well. The societal collapse of the land of whirlpools would also explain why the land of waves was constantly referred to as a small and poor island nation. In this theory, the Land of Waves would have just had to have restarted their society after the ruling clan left it. I have two major problems with this theory though. One is one piece of evidence being that we know that the Great Naruto Bridge extends west from the Land of Waves, so it must be on the east coast of the Land of Fire. This doesn't necessarily work because the east coast is massive, and even the southwestern part of the Land of Fire juts out into the ocean enough that there could be a bridge going west there too. The other discrepancy I have are the names. Why wouldn't Kishimoto just use the same name for both nations, or even say that the name was changed to the Land of Waves? However, this can be countered by this just being a retcon, as the two maps I compared earlier are almost 500 chapters apart. Overall, I think this theory has a lot of validity to it. There's only one island shown to be next to the Land of Fire, and considering how both countries are shaped almost the exact same, I think that would have to be intentional. Even better is that the Land of Waves have no shinobi in it, which would be explained by the Land of Whirlpools having all their shinobi flee decades earlier. I'd also like to point out how poetic it would be if an Uzumaki was the one who got this nation back on its feet again. Orochimaru stole his outfits. I find this one to be hilarious. I searched for this and I could only find like 3 times as has been mentioned on the internet. I swear I watched a YouTube video on it too, but I couldn't find it. When Orochimaru was fighting Team 7 in the Forest of Death, he was disguised as another Genin the entire fight. It was not a transformation jutsu either, he literally stole the girl's face right before the Force of Death. But here's the weird thing. The corpse of the woman was wearing the same outfit as Orochimaru's normal outfit. So he didn't literally steal her outfit, but could have just had a different outfit that looked the exact same. But after he leaves the Forest of Death, he never changes from that outfit despite no longer needing to be disguised. So it's a really funny idea that Orochimaru loved this outfit so much that he's decided to wear it for several years afterwards. But this is sadly debunked, as in Kabuto's flashback, Orochimaru is wearing this outfit long before the Chunin exams. So more than likely he told this woman to borrow his drip and then just killed her so he could still look fresh while being disguised as her. Sasuke destroyed Obito's sharingans. This refers to the stash of sharingans we see Obito have in one of the Akatsuki hideouts. He presumably got them during the Uchiha massacre. We saw them on one page when Obito gave Sasuke Itachi's eyes, but after that we never see them again. The fate of the hideout is also not known for sure. We know that Anko did find where it was, so presumably after the war the place was investigated. If that's the case, then the Leaf would have been able to choose whatever they wanted to do with them, which would likely be destroy them. This theory proposes that Sasuke destroyed them when he left the hideout after recovering from eye surgery. We saw a bunch of white Zetsu try to stop Sasuke from leaving, and he quite literally busted out of the hideout with a Susanoo. As in, we see the entire outside of the hideout crack and shake when he bust out. So if the hideout collapsed because of this, those sharingans would have been destroyed as a result. If they weren't destroyed, it's possible that Sasuke went back to the hideout after the war and personally destroyed it. Or when the Leaf went back there, he was consulted on the matter and chose to have them destroyed. I personally think they were destroyed when Sasuke bust out of the mountain graveyard, considering that the entire hideout was violently shaking when he did so. Madara copied Edo Tensei. This refers to the moment where Madara broke out of Edo Tensei right after Kabuto released it. Itachi forced Kabuto to do the hand signs to release Edo Tensei, but Madara countered by doing the signs of Edo Tensei to cancel the Edo Tensei being cancelled. It's kind of dumb, but Madara needed to stay in the plot at this point. How he learned these signs is a mystery. We know it was developed by Tobirama and it became a forbidden jutsu, at least by part 1. So why would Madara know this, because there's no way Tobirama would have shared it with him. Zetsu likely didn't tell Madara either, because Madara expected to be brought back with Reine Rebirth instead of Edo Tensei. He was, however, familiar with Edo Tensei, as he did remark while dropping a meteor on the Shinobi Alliance. The original purpose of Edo Tensei was to take others down with you. If Zetsu and Tobirama didn't tell Madara, then the only option is possible is that Madara copied the hand sides from Tobirama in some type of battle against the Senju. He may have copied them hoping it could lead to him learning how to do it himself. I doubt Kishimoto cared to think of a reason why he knew these signs though, because it would have just been explained in one panel. If there was one way, the only realistic way I see him learning is through copying the signs with his sharingan from Tobirama. Sasuke destroyed Madara's corpse. This is another mystery that I've seen only brought up a handful of times in the Naruto community. At the end of the war, we see Madara spit out by Kaguya when she's being sealed, and he even makes it back to the real world with Team 7. He has a talk with Hashirama, dies, and that's the last time we see the body. Considering the havoc that was wreaked because there was corpse to be used for Edo Tensei, I don't think anyone wanted there to be any trace of Madara left. So I doubt he was buried, instead his body was destroyed. Sasuke may have been asked to Amaterasu it, as that would have been the most effective form of cremation, but even further than that, I think Sasuke would have wanted to personally destroy it. When Madara was talking to Hashirama, Sasuke wanted to kill Madara at that moment after all. It's a toss-up on if Sasuke was the one to dispose Madara's body, but all in all, I'm certain it was completely destroyed out of fear of him being revived again. Itachi stole the Totsuka blade. This also refers to the Yada mirror, I just didn't have room to add it. Something I never see anyone bring up is how Itachi got both of these spirit weapons. All Susanoo users have unique weapons for their Susanoo, whether that be Sasuke's bow, an arrow, or Kakashi's Kamui shurikens. Itachi's weapons are different though, as there is some background to them, mainly the Totsuka blade, which was said to be related to Orochimaru's Kusanagi blade. Orochimaru himself said he had been looking for it, and Zetsu remarked that he now realized why no one could find it. So how did Itachi find it and where could it have been? Unfortunately, we know nothing directly about his backstory at all. We can presume it's not an Uchiha weapon since no other Uchiha, including Madara, ever had it. Orochimaru also was looking for it, so it might have been able to be used without a Susanoo, or alternatively Orochimaru just didn't have much intel on it because I'm not sure how he could have wielded such a large blade. Perhaps it can shrink to become handheld. It's weird that Itachi could find it and Orochimaru could not, considering that Orochimaru left the village before Itachi did. You would think Orochimaru would be better at finding something like that, but I will say that Itachi's general knowledge is very underrated. Still though, if this wasn't a weapon possessed by a previous Uchiha, I have no idea how Itachi could have found it before anyone else did. This theory is almost a complete shot in the dark, but it guesses that the blade was hidden by someone somewhere and Itachi took it. If I had to bet who it was, I would say the Sage of the Sixth Pass was the one who hid it since it's so mysterious. I don't have much faith in this theory though, but it's the best one I could come up for this mystery. Jiraiya was scared of Orochimaru and Konoha Crush. This one refers to the head-scratching behavior we see from Jiraiya during Konoha Crush. We see him come back to the village to train Naruto, and is told by Ebisu that Orochimaru is back, but he is hardly present during Konoha Crush. He doesn't join the fight until Hiruzen defeats the first two Hokage, when he takes on a snake summoner on the outskirts of the village, so he's a bit late to say the least. All the Jonin and Leaf had been told by Hiruzen to expect an attack by the final exams, so why would Jiraiya not be in the village for this? He even knows that Hiruzen would be targeted by Orochimaru because the first thing he did was ask where Hiruzen was. There's no evidence showing that he was ever debriefed on the expectation for the attack during the finals, but if he wasn't, that's on him for not staying in the know. So the whole situation just makes Jiraiya look very dumb or very apprehensive. This theory speculates that Jiraiya did not want to fight Orochimaru because that would be the only explanation for why he was late to the assault. The only other piece of evidence for this would be that the little known fact that Jiraiya and Orochimaru actually fought when Orochimaru left the village. We see them have a Final Valley-like situation where Jiraiya is way more damaged than Orochimaru. Presumably Orochimaru beat Jiraiya here because Jiraiya says he failed that day. In the very next arc, we see Jiraiya and Tsunade fight Orochimaru and he's not scared at one bit in that fight. This is another long shot theory since we're at the bottom of the iceberg, so more than likely I think Kishimoto just didn't want Jiraiya interfering with Orochimaru versus Hiruzen, and didn't think it would be weird if Jiraiya showed up that late. Hiruzen killed the Gold and Silver brothers. I'm not going to spend much time in the background of their death for this series since I already did that earlier. To add on to what I said, we have a very rough timeline of when these two could have died. We know that they are alive by the time that the Third Hokage takes over because they recognize Darui's identical black lightning tattoo. They should not be alive by the Third Great Shinobi War because by then Madara was basically bedridden, and Hashirama's wife Mitu Uzumaki had also grown quite old before that war too. They also are reanimated young, so if they were old they would have looked like Hiruzen did. It's unlikely that a Cloud Shinobi did it, as based off their headbands, they did not go rogue, and none of the Cloud Shinobi that fought them said that their country turned on them. It's unlikely they died during the Second Great Shinobi War, because there's no evidence that the Cloud participated in it. For that war, we only know that the fighting occurred in the Rain Village, which is sandwiched in between the Stone, Leaf, and Sand villages. As I said earlier, just some normal army could not take one of the brothers down, So either a giant army or a very powerful person or group did this. This theory proposes that during the First Great Shinobi War, Hiruzen led an army or a group to avenge Tobirama. This likely didn't happen in the Second Great War because there's no evidence that Kages fought during that, whereas with the First Shinobi War we know a bunch of Kages died in battle. Now the fact that Kakashi was at the fair signaled that there was probably an army assembled because he would have had to have been a mercenary. Although there is a small chance that Kakashi was part of the Kingu and Gingu squad of 20 men too. However, I think it's less likely because he survived the encounter. Unlike the last two, I'm a little more confident in this one. It's possible some other Kage did it, like Onoki or Mu, or even Getsu, but I just chose Hiruzen because we know that the Leaf and the Cloud fought in this war. Kisame caused an economic collapse. This refers to the fact that Kisame was said to have been suspected for assassinating several daimyo when he was introduced in part 1. The daimyo themselves are also another mystery. It doesn't really make sense why they have any control over the land since they aren't shinobi. It seemed that they are the supreme leader and also in charge of the jobs shinobi do. We know this because the Wind daimyo stopped outsourcing jobs to the Sand Village as much, and that's what led to them allying with Orochimaru for Konoha Crush. Personally, I don't see why Kage just doesn't do this if they ruled the capital of the country. As for Kisame, since he assassinated several daimyo, I would think that this would cause some type of economic and political turmoil. For example, when JFK was assassinated, there was a flash crash in the stock market that lasted for several months. I'll admit this is not that important, and the theory is a shot in the dark, but I really just want to bring up the daimyo because we know very little about them despite how important they are. Jiraiya wanted Conan. This one is a meme that is shared here and there, but I think it has a lot of validity to it. When Jiraiya said goodbye to his Rain Village students, he has an individual message for each student. He tells Yahiko not to cry because people will think he's a coward. He tells Nagato that it seemed like they had all grown up now. And then he tells Conan that she will grow up to be beautiful and they should meet again one day. I've seen a few times where people have brought this up as a concern, but it has been overwhelmingly met with people defending Jiraiya. Now, I don't know about you, but if I thought I met the reincarnation of Ninja Jesus, I think I would rather meet him again than Conan. I know you can call something or someone beautiful platonically, but do we really think Jiraiya of all people has the capability of doing that? I mean, when he first met Naruto, he asked him to permanently be in sexy jutsu while they were training. He also immediately folded the second he saw the woman Itachi was controlling lure Jiraiya away from Naruto. I mean, come on. It seems very intentional that he said Conan specifically that she was going to be a good-looking adult and he wanted to meet only her in the future. Not Ninja Jesus, but some little girl that could do origami. I'm pretty confident in this one based off of Jiraiya's past. Quick note about Itachi though, when Jiraiya comes back to the hotel room, the girl is knocked out for some reason. Jiraiya realizes that it was a genjutsu, but why would she be unconscious after being released from it? When Rain was broken out of a genjutsu by her teammates, she stayed conscious, and so did Naruto when Chiyo and Sakura broke him out of Itachi's own genjutsu. So I guess for another meme theory, you could say Jiraiya roofied the girl and then tried to play it off. A more serious theory would be that Itachi botched the genjutsu on purpose, and either she fell asleep as part of the genjutsu or just fell asleep after being broken out of it. And then Jiraiya took her back to the hotel room to question her. It's really odd that she went unconscious. I'm going to bet this was Itachi's doing to set up a reason for them to flee. Gold and Silver brothers are related to Kaguya. This refers to the subtle moment where A estimates that the reason why they could eat nine-tailed chakra is because they were related to the Sage of the Sixth Pass. I don't think this makes too much sense though, as Hagoromo's descendants Indra and Asura were the founders of the Uchiha and Senju clan. They're definitely not Uchiha, and probably not Senju since the Senju went to the Leaf. It would help explain how they got Hagoromo's treasure tools though. They also have horns, which all Utsutsuki seem to have. I propose they aren't directly related to Hagoromo, but instead are members of the Kaguya clan. Hamura's descendants became the Hyuga clan, but the Kaguya clan was said to come straight from Kaguya, which actually makes it seem like Kaguya had another child that we just didn't know anything about. They also seemed like warmongers since they assassinated the second Raikage for a peace deal with the Leaf. Orochimaru said the Kaguya clan were savages that only enjoyed fighting, and that's why they disappeared, because they fought to their extinction. There are some counterpoints to this though. Kaguya clan members are shown to have red dots on their forehead, but we don't see this because they wear a forehead protector. No other Kaguya clan member are shown to have horns either, so their appearance doesn't match some of the lore that would make sense if they were Kages. This one's a toss-up for me on if it's true. But with this, I've covered the entire iceberg now. This is a video I especially want to see your opinions on. I talked about a lot of ambiguous subjects here, and I love talking about mysteries and fan theories about Naruto. I'd also like for people to comment any other theories that I didn't bring up. Just in general, I just really want to see some discussions going on, and I'm going to join some discussions in the comments if they seem very interesting. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say. And thank y'all for watching, and I guess I'll see y'all next time.